Hey everyone, it's Courtney here with another episode of Millennial versus Machine. Welcome back. If you are watching me on YouTube right now, you see I kind of have a little bit of a different look. I'm rocking the hat today. The curls were not curling today. Let's just be real. So we are covering it up with a hat. I'm trying to get a little bit more intentional with my posting on my YouTube channel. I have a lot of videos that are super old, not as much new content. And so follow me on YouTube. The link is in the show notes. We continue our series entitled A Real Estate Broker's Heart. Okay. And I'm speaking from the heart as your favorite real estate broker. Now, we started the series with just a brief introduction. The last episode, we talked about systems for licensing and compliance. That's a big component of being a real estate broker and serving the agents that you sponsor. Um, I'm actually being really intentional as we talk about these systems that brokers have to have in place. And when I say that, I mean really intentional about the good stuff. I'm going to save the really good stuff for last. One of those items is lead generation. Okay. That is big if you're in any kind of sales, okay, let alone real estate sales. And so we're going to get there, I promise. But today I want to talk a little bit about a subject that is near and dear to my heart. And that really is systems for training. Let me grab my notes over here. Systems for training. Okay. So we covered systems for licensing and compliance. And today we're going to talk about training. Now, it's near and dear to my heart because I don't know if you guys know this, but I know I said it on a podcast episode many, many moons ago. But I used to be a teacher. I taught bilingual kindergarten for 2 years in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and I taught bilingual first grade for 1 year, also in DFW, in 2 different districts, and, oh my gosh, what a season. I could almost do a whole podcast episode about that, but that's not why we're here. We're talking about real estate, business, life, and everything in between, and in particular, systems for training. And so I give you a little bit of my background because it's such an enjoyable time. And even though I was teaching elementary school students at that time, over 12 years ago, um, it still actually helps me as a real estate broker today. Now, especially when you are first getting started in the real estate industry, training is a must. Not only training on how to sell, right, and how to do it effectively, but also training on real estate topics. I'll give you an example. Today, I covered creative financing with my agents. And I'm going to talk with you here in a minute about how I came to that topic because the topics that a broker covers really should be relevant. But that's one thing that we're in the beginning of 2024. It's coming up a lot. Creative financing strategies to help buyers and sellers alike, whether that be subject to financing, wraparound mortgages is another way to that they refer to subject to loan assumption or other seller financing, and also hard money. That's another thing that we covered a little bit today. Okay. So that's one topic that I covered today. Now, when we talk about the systems for training, okay, training is something that whether you are an agent or a broker, you have to prioritize. Okay. Because what I believe is if you are not learning and growing, then you are dying pretty much. Okay. And in an industry like real estate that is constantly changing and moving, especially now in the climate that we're in, training is key. So let's talk about, I listed out in my notes one, two, three, four, five different components of your system for training. Okay. As a designated broker here in Texas, I actually offer typically monthly training on contract forms. I'm actually a certified CE instructor as well. So some of those do qualify for CE credit. But on top of like the monthly contract training, I also do a weekly bite-sized lunch and learn, okay? It's typically very informal, although I do have structures like with like slide decks and everything like that. But to me as a broker, getting in front of your agents and talking about just topics that are really relevant to them at any given time is really key, right? Not only for compliance perspective, because there's a compliance component with training as a broker, but also oversight, right? Oversight and really connecting with my agents. Okay, so let's talk about these, handful of components of your system for training. Okay, now the first topic I'm going to cover is content. Content is key. Okay, agents will not show up if the content is not on point. Okay. Content, it may shift with the type of market that we're in. If it's a buyer's market or a seller's market, that content is going to shift, right? Content can include financing related topics. We've got forms, which I kind of talked a little bit about it as well. Our forms change periodically throughout the year, sometimes annually, sometimes biannually. Okay. Um, the other piece of content is there may be new and innovative practices within real estate that give you as the broker or me as the broker really good content to cover. Okay. And on top of the content piece, I want to talk about relevance. Relevance is really important as well because, if you are covering something that really, let's say you're covering oh gosh, I can't even think of a topic right off the top of my head. Uh Something that is really relevant on top of owner financing or seller financing and creative financing right now um are topics about buyer's agency, right? That's a hot topic right now. That is a relevant topic right now that all agents should understand. They should understand agency, period, but particularly on the buy side, what that means and how to navigate those situations. So, relevance is key. I'm trying to think of another topic that is coming up a lot. Uh, Dealing with vacant land. That's actually been coming up a lot, whether, an agent represents the buyer or the seller. There are things that really need to be addressed and considered when you're navigating transactions with vacant land. The last thing that I'll talk about is commercial real estate. Okay. In the state of Texas, when you are licensed, you can do commercial or residential. Now, where it comes into question is the competency piece, right? You should be competent in the topic and the processes and the protocols, right? But also geographically, you need to be competent. Okay. I'll give you an example. Have an agent who has a property. Actually, I have a couple of agents who have had properties that, it's vacant land that is zoned commercial and residential, right? What do? As a broker, these are the type of topics that I have to cover in my training, right? Yes, I can do one-on-one training, but I find that a lot of great questions come when I do small group trainings, okay, or different office trainings. So that is also part of the content and the relevance piece, okay? Now let's talk about the third component of the systems for training is consistency, okay? I mentioned that I typically do a contract training once a month, and then I do weekly bite-sized training sessions. Now, I'm not saying that you as a broker, have to do that, or as an agent that you should expect your broker to do that. But what I am saying is that as a broker, there should be some level of consistency, and it's required from an oversight perspective. And as an agent, if you're shopping around brokers, you really should um, ask questions about how do you train? What are the expectations, right? What am I required to attend or not required to attend? And what is in it for me? I mean, if you're shopping around different brokers, right? Typically there's commission splits. Training is important, right? It's almost a form of reciprocity between whatever you split, whatever commission you split with your broker, and then what you get in return for being with that broker, right? So consistency is key. Now, there are a lot of different programs, even that agents can subscribe to, sales coaching programs, obviously, different continuing education providers that can also supplement if you do have a broker that is not as hands on. I personally, and this is not a sales pitch at all, okay? This is just so that you know what to look for, or if you are a broker that is aspiring to level up, something that you can implement in your normal business practice. But consistency is key for me. I like to be in front of my agents, right? I, as a broker, and I mentioned this on the introduction, my heart is really to be that broker that agents want to call instead of that broker that agents dread calling, right? Um, Brokers, we can choose how we want to be. Okay. That's just how I like to be. And consistency is key. Okay. I just covered content, I covered relevance, I covered consistency. Now let's round out with the last two components of the systems for training, right? Second to the last component is feedback. For me, feedback is really important. Okay. For some, feedback, they hear the word and they automatically think negative. Okay, that's not me, right? I want to give my agents what it is that they want and what it is that they need. Okay. And I like to hear feedback. I have had trainings. It's funny. I think I was hosting some classes about buyer's agency. And there was one in particular training that I did, and I'm like, this did not work. And I actually told my team, I'm like, you know what? This fell a little flat, guys. We're going to pick it up for part two, right? Feedback is important. Now, that was feedback that I just felt because, I try to be pretty self aware about these things. And especially if you are a broker teaching, it is so important that you are looking at the reactions, like the facial reactions, right? The social cues, right? The questions that you're getting in the chat, if it's virtual or in person, right? Are people scrolling on their phone and not really engaged? All of those things are feedback. That's feedback, okay? That will let you know if you're on track, if people are getting it, or even if you need to restate some things. And I've actually had numerous trainings like that where, maybe I realized, oh, people are kind of scrunching their face up. I need to kind of adjust this thing. And then maybe in that moment, I will go in and I'll restate what I said in a different way to make sure I understand. Now, feedback doesn't always have to be um, after the class, right? After the training. You are constantly getting feedback if you're, mindful of it and paying attention to it with your attendees. And that's what I was saying about paying attention to those cues. Okay. But being able to adapt to feedback in the moment as well as after the class is really good. A lot of people, when they host classes, they will have a feedback form at the end. And that's important. That is totally important, to just adjust. I mean, like I said, if I think there's opportunities for all of us to grow. I'm constantly growing in how I do things and how I teach, and train my different agents and teammates. Okay. And then the last component of the systems for training is refresh or a refresher. Okay. This is crucial because I have done training, like, for example, I did a training 2 years ago, right? And I probably have talked a little bit about it here and there, like, in the last 2 years, but I have noticed that really we need consistent refreshers. So, for example, some of my agents that I call OGs, right? They're really experienced. Maybe they're coming to me with a lot of experience. I still do a refresher, even if it's a contract refresher, even if it's somebody that's been in the game for 15, 20 years, right? They join me, if they join my team, um, a simple contract refresher is really important because it allows me to see what they're bringing in and then any gaps that I need to fill. Okay. So those are the components of the systems for training. The last thing I want to talk about, and we're right on time. These episodes have been a little bit short and sweet. Hope you don't mind. I kind of like them, but it's all about you though, right? So feedback is good. I'm going to link a poll. If you are on Spotify, there will be a poll for you to give me some feedback on this episode and on this series. I would love it. Okay. If you're not on Spotify or you're listening on another platform, rate me, right? I'd love a 5-star rating or review with feedback. Okay. But right? I just built that right into the episode. The last thing that I want to cover, I heard this on a podcast. I think it's the podcast is called The Leader's Cut. One of my favorite podcasts, actually. Leadership podcast for sure. Definitely Jesus and the Bible's all mixed in there as well. But he had referenced in an episode not too long ago about a 70-38-55% communication rule. Okay. That 7%. I hope I didn't say 17. It's been a long day. 7%, 38%, and 55% communication rule. And I'm actually going to read. So if I'm not looking at the camera, I'm looking at what this says on Dr. Google. It says, according to, I don't know his name, Mehrabian. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Okay. It'll be linked in the show notes. According to Mehrabian, the three elements account differently for our liking for the person who puts forward a message concerning their feelings. Okay. I didn't pick the right article. Okay. Let me dial it back a little bit because I don't even like how that's coming out. It's not clear. Okay. Example of being in tune with yourself and how you're saying things. Basically, the successful communication of a message is determined by these three main things. Okay. So when you communicate, what the audience receives is based on each of these categories. Okay. Um, and so basically, words count for 7% of your messaging. Okay. Words count for 7% of your messaging. Okay. So what people are receiving, like 7% is really what matters in terms of words. Okay. 38% of your messaging involves your tone of voice. Okay. And facial expressions or physical expression accounts for 55% of your communication. And I don't love that definition. Let me see. Let me see if there's another one because I feel like I need to restate it. So thanks for bearing with me. Um, all right. Okay. Okay. This is what I don't even know if I love that explanation of it. I included this in my team in a message to my team not too long ago, and I cannot find the original article. So let me just read this, and I'm going to put this in the show notes. In a high stakes negotiation, nonverbal cues like body language and tone of voice can communicate more about a person's feelings than their words. Okay. Albert Mehrabian's 7-38-55 rule is a theory that seeks to quantify how much of meaning is communicated via verbal and nonverbal communication methods. As a negotiator, learning how to apply the 7-38-55 rule in a negotiation situation will help you understand what your negotiating partners are communicating and better control your own messaging. Okay. So, the 7-38-55 rule is a concept concerning the communication of emotions. The rule states that 7% of meaning is communicated through spoken word. I already said that. Okay. 38% through tone of voice and 55% through body language. It was developed by psychology professor Albert Mehrabian at the University of California, Los Angeles, who laid out this concept in his 1971 book, Silent Messages. Okay. Thank you for bearing with me. That kind of took a minute. I haven't decided if I'm going to cut that out or not, but that's the 7-38-55 rule. Why do I highlight that towards the end of our episode? Okay. That is because, especially in a virtual environment, this is key. When I show up to training, I am always very mindful, and I encourage you to use this if you are training, but I also encourage you to use this as you are engaging with other real estate professionals and your customers and your clients. Okay. So I know, especially in a virtual environment, when I am teaching a class, okay, that number one, we all have a bazillion and one things going on in our mind. Okay. If somebody attends one of my classes, I already know that they're thinking about who they're going to meet today at 3 o'clock. They're thinking about their sick kid who's at home, who's blowing up their phone via text message. Okay. They're thinking about the beef that they had with their partner, right? That's what we're all bringing, right? We're bringing life into any given training situation. And I'm mindful of that when I teach. Okay. And so as a result of that, there are some things that I will do in my training to engage with my audience more using my verbal language. You guys, it's so funny because this is natural for me, but even when I'm like talking to the video on this recording, I'm using my hands, right? You may see me like lean in and turn my head. Like these are the different things that will help us engage with our attendees in training. Okay. Um, for example, or another example of this is when I am teaching, happened today, when I am teaching, and I see people nodding their head, right? That shows me, oh, they're engaged. And I may call that person out, not put them on blast, but just say, hey, yep, I see so and so is feeling me, right? Um, when I do that, it kind of makes it so that um I'm engaging with them. I'm keeping them active, right? It's not just me speaking to a screen or speaking to an audience, okay? Kind of like what I'm doing now. But who's paying attention, okay? um but these are the components that a broker really has to take to heart when they're teaching, okay? The tone of voice. I will change my inflection to emphasize certain things, right? If you are an agent and you're reviewing a contract with a customer, right? You can use this to emphasize certain things, right? To check for understanding. Like these are skills that we can use no matter what. I almost should have just did the whole podcast about this theory and just like read up on it a little bit more, okay? Maybe next time, okay? Maybe later on in this series. Um and maybe once I finish this book that I'm in right now by Chris Voss, is Never Split the Difference, which is all about negotiating skills and all of that good stuff. And that's where this theory is referenced in that book. And so, long story short, for training to be, I think, successful and engaging, we have to use the tone. We have to use our body language, right? We have to use our voice inflections. And then we have to use like words that our audience can understand and that is relevant to them. And all of those things are going to help your message, help your training really land, and help you communicate what you intend to communicate. I hope this is helpful. Thank you for letting me just kind of vibe towards the end, especially as I was getting my words and my messaging right with this 7-38-55 rule. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day. We're experiencing some crazy weather here in Texas, so please be safe wherever you may be. Thank you again for tuning in to this episode of the Millennial versus Machine podcast, and I will see you next week. Take care, guys.